checking out another episode of Live and Lead. If you want to learn more about the E2 Initiative, go to e2initiative.org. You know, like many people, I wear on my wrist an Apple Watch. And among many of its cool features, one of the things I value the most, maybe you do too, is the activity tracker. Now, my activity tracker records my morning runs and tells me, among other things, my distance, my time, my pace, calories burned. You know, a few months ago, before the intense summer heat of Texas set in, I went for a run on a beautiful, crisp spring morning. It was one of those rare days. You know how it is, rare, but I felt like I could run forever. After running for a much longer time than I normally would, at the completion of my workout, I glanced at my activity tracker, and the unthinkable had happened. I failed to turn it on. Can you believe that? Now, if you ever had that happen, you'll know the sick feeling that I experienced that day. Even though I ran that day, it was like my run never happened. No recorded time, no distance, no pace, no calories burned. You see, the desire to measure one's progress is not a bad thing. Comparing the distance, time, or pace of one of my runs with another helps me to track my progress and to look for areas of improvement. Comparison isn't a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing, especially when we become consumed with comparing our lives with the lives of others. It's no wonder, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who called comparison the thief of joy. When you and I willingly choose to play the comparison game, we're always going to find someone who is better than we are at something, who has more friends than we do, whose career is advancing faster than ours, who has more followers on social media, or a larger portfolio. I mean, the list can go on and on. You see, when we choose to compare ourselves with others, we create a false measuring stick. We measure our own worthiness based on the perceived success of other people. But here's the problem. God doesn't see us in the same way that we see others. He doesn't measure our self-worth by our net worth. And He certainly doesn't measure our significance by our success. I want you to hear this. God measures us not by our influence, but God measures us by His intention. You see, He created you to be you, not someone else. And He evaluates you based on His purposes for you, not on the purposes that He has for somebody else's life. Think about this. When you look at the life of David, when he faced the giant Goliath, David chose not to compare himself with Goliath. Had he chosen to do that, he surely would have viewed himself as small, insignificant, incapable. Had he chosen to measure himself by Goliath, the story would have ended much differently. No, instead, David chose to compare Goliath to his God. When David viewed Goliath through the lens of God and God's purposes for David, suddenly David's task, though not easy, was achievable. You see, the strengths and successes that we see in others and preoccupy our thoughts only serve to magnify the weaknesses that we see in us. Comparison will steal your joy every single time. Remember, God doesn't see others as better than us or more successful than us. God sees them as different than us. You see, we have an intentional God, and His plan for each of us is different. He has an intentional plan for us. So instead of looking at others as the measure of your worth or your value, why not measure your life by how passionately and faithfully you are pursuing what God has called you to do? Listen to the words of 2 Corinthians 10 and verses 12 through 18, and let these words soak into your soul. Find out what God has called you to do. Stop comparing yourself to what everyone else around you is doing. Listen to Paul's words. He says, we don't compare or classify ourselves by those who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves among themselves, they show their ignorance. No, Paul says we will not boast beyond the limits that God has assigned to us, what God has called us to do. Therefore, let him who boasts, boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord